Okay, so you're in two minds about Spartacus, aren't you? There's some of you who are thinking, I love Stanley Kubrick. Oh, it's a shame that Spartacus is in his filmography, this bland and didactic old Hollywood epic, which Kubrick had no control over. Kubrick didn't have much control over the outcome of Spartacus compared to other features that he worked on, certainly after Spartacus, although there is a clear indicator that without Kubrick, certain undertakings wouldn't have been committed to in the Spartacus production, and these are facets of the production which, frankly, improve it. So, yes, you can consider Spartacus an example of a film successful because of Kubrick and very elevated because of via Kubrick. Now, the other mind of Spartacus is that it's a major classic, and Kubrick assisted the film in its more status of something interesting and worthwhile than it might have been if it was just another Anthony Mann picture. And we love Anthony Mann, although this would have just been another film for Anthony Mann, whereas Kubrick had not only never worked on anything like this film before, hadn't necessarily expected to, and wanted to do something with it as someone who considered himself an outsider or not, didn't consider this sort of production desirable in and of itself. I mean, I know he did want to do the Napoleon film, although, well, that's implying he has full control over the production in the case of Napoleon, which, like Kubrick claimed, it probably would have been the greatest film ever made, unless Jodorowsky realized Dune, or Leone Stalingrad, or Herzog the Conquest of Mexico. We could go through this all day, we're not going to. Spartacus, you need to come around to Spartacus as not only the finest accomplishment of that old Hollywood banal epic structure, actually it's extolling the virtues of a sort of universal humanism rather than the didactic, quasi-Baroque Christian, Protestant at that, superstructures of Hollywood morality. Blah. Do you want Spartacus or do you want those like crummy like early 60s, like remember like John Frankenheimer before Manchurian Candidate, and like after the television productions in the 50s, Young Strangers 57, that's a theatrical feature, but you know, where it's just like these message movies like Post Code, like, ooh yeah, this movie's about how like the morality of the United States and the civic culture of the United States will prevail through everything. And it's like, shut up. I mean, not that you can't have optimism in that, but like I said, a movie like, watch my Young Strangers video if you want elaboration on this. You leave the theater after the Young Strangers, you're like, yeah, the world's got problems. You have some lunch and you go home and nothing changes. That's my problem with those sorts of films. Well, more that they're just not very interesting films, but there's that tension hanging over them as well. You ever hear these goofy cornball, like love, sappy, you're my girl, love songs from the 60s, but then you think, hang on, like, I don't know if, how long were you with that girl? Like 3 months? Like, you got divorced in like 70-something at the earliest. It's like, you know how there's all that, you know, George Harrison wrote something about Patty, but then Patty left George, and so that song lacks a certain power, I feel, or there's something cynical about listening to that song. I know it's an adored Beatles song, and Frank Sinatra said, I don't care, I don't think that song's that great. It's good, like, it's good in a more objective sense, but does it move me? No. I mean, I don't have a soul, to be fair. I mean, I do, but it belongs to the Pope and Christ. I'm a papist, so I can just deal with it. Anyway, but then also Eric Clapton, who was later with Patty, who was obsessed with her, apparently. Layla's about. That track Layla is... I don't like that song that much. The piano bit by Jim Gordon, which is in Goodfellas, I love that. But the Layla, like, Eric Clapton's not great. And not even without him as a person and all the kind of nasty Nazi shit he said in the 70s, Enoch Powell, whatever. Like, I mean, not whatever, but, like, even if... Like, that's not even factoring into my dislike of him as a recording artist. I didn't even know about any of that stuff when I first came to the conclusion that I didn't like Eric Clapton. I wasn't even aware of that Powell speech he made at one time. Speech, I don't even know if I want to dignify it by referring to it as such. But in any case, the point is, it's like, Clapton's like, oh yeah, Patty, Layla, blah, blah, blah. But, like, they got divorced in the 80s, so, like, the point is, like, you hear all these old goofy songs, and you're just kind of thinking, but didn't you guys turn out to be douchebags and materialist dickheads anyway? So, like, who cares? So that's my problem with a lot of old Hollywood morality, is this
it's hollow. It doesn't reflect the reality of the world. And not that you cannot be optimistic and strive for something more, or even honestly and unignorantly, but still sincerely patriotic work. I'm not saying you can't commit to that sort of thing and that it's impossible. 7 Days in May might be Frankenheimer's great way of fusing civics with filmic exhilaration, or the train for that matter, actually. My point is, we needed films for, and humanity, we needed to find virtues and qualities within our species' capabilities that weren't tied to a certain didactic program, which is the program of the 30s, 40s, 50s being, oh, America's good, Judeo-Christianity's good, or at least the parts that we decide are good, and the Constitution's great, and history's over, and just pretend that there's no threat of nuclear Armageddon until we need you to, kill some people who have different political beliefs than you because we have the Second Amendment. Oh wait, pretend we don't occasionally out of convenience. You know how it is. It's amazing how like there are people now who like, oh no, the McCarthy era was right because of communism. It's like they're happy to defend the freedom of speech of the far right, but they're like okay with the far left being persecuted, which is it's insane to me. Like, I don't get that, to be honest. I don't even love the extremes of the far left, but it's amazing to me how many Americans sooner demonize that than fascism, which, like, their logic is, oh, communism's bad because it's the same as fascism, but where fascists are concerned, they defend their freedom of speech, It's interesting. It's telling. Point I'm making is Spartacus is actually a magnificent film. We need to come round that it's not one of the old Hollywood, Quo Vadis or Ben-Hur's or whatever's. It's something new and quasi, not new wave, but it's more into tradition of those great French epics by Offals or Abel Gance. And this is who Kubrick is, you understand. It's the kind of thing that it's new wave in the sense that Truffaut is new wave. Like Truffaut, there's a certain formalism there, but he is drawing attention to the medium in a manner that would have been considered indulgent in pre-new wave, certainly in Hollywood, possibly in Europe as well, though not as Yad Kahir's in Europe at least, a champion. Because Lola Montez was not a well-received film at the time, except in places like Kahir's, for example. Anyway, I might be going on for too long here. I'm going to listen back to what I have recorded, and then I'll see if there's anything else we need to bookend this recording overall with. Let's face it, in going about what it's accused of doing, acting as this old Hollywood, money on screen, banal epic, Spartacus, inarguably, is a stupendous execution of this formula. And as a film which goes beyond that formula and elevates that formula into the finest development outgrowth of that artistic archetype, Spartacus is far more than what its critics might accuse it of. And while it's rooted in that, it was elevated from being that via not only the direction of Kubrick, but the very important inclusion. Think about how the snobby UK considers Spartacus far above the average Hollywood epics of the 50s, the Ben-Hur type film, the Quo Vadis, the Cleopatras, because of the presence of Laurence Olivier, Charles Laughton, and Peter Ustinov, some of their finest screen performances of all time. They were all there on set, trying to compete with each other. It sharpened their skills. One of the greatest examples of the British thespian tradition, animating and really transcending the surroundings of, in this case, I think, well, it's not all them, but I certainly think Kubrick's Anglophilia was encouraging here, truly transforming Spartacus into more of a classic than it could have been otherwise. Spartacus is one of the great films. It's not just one of these oh, that's what people thought in the old Hollywood days. Now we're nouveau vague. We're 21st century now. We don't like Kubrick except for 2001 onwards, except when we pretend Doctor Strangelove is funny. Yeah, that movie's hilarious, isn't it? It's not. People who think that movie's funny are kidding themselves. Maybe if you saw it at the time, but like, people afterward just want to be a part of something and feel like they're part of the smart club. No one honest finds that movie funny. Maybe if you saw it at the time. That's my most controversial film opinion, I would imagine. Yeah, fuck Doctor Strangelove. It's all about Spartacus. Let's be totally honest about that. Come on, guys. It's time. We need to decide. You are free. Use Spartacus. Oh, no wonder you don't like Spartacus, because the idea of freedom and liberation is like, no, you'd rather be part of the hierarchical, tyrannical empire. You must love her. You must grovel at her feet. And while there, I'll ask you if you prefer snails or oysters, and if you consider the eating of oysters to be moral. That's one of the great scenes of all time. Fantastic. They had Tony Hopkins voice Olivier's part because the audio for that scene, which had been cut for the 60 release, was lost. They had the visual. They didn't have the audio. So at least for that bath segment, not for the grovel at her feet. That the second portion of that scene, I'm pretty sure that's Olivier, although the first portion is almost certainly Hopkins, or definitely Hopkins according to the record. In any case, that's my Spartacus take and my Doctor Strangelove take and my take on a few other things. Feel free to get mad at me in the comments. Feel free to unsubscribe. Whatever makes your day better. Actually, if you definitely want to make your day a superior day than it has been thus far, turn this video off. Never go on YouTube again. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it very immensely. Out of sight.